as a kid. I was very argumentative. I'd argue a lot. I'd question my teachers on everything. And now I hate arguing. I guess my form of arguing is to hopefully develop a case that's so overwhelmingly on my side that there's really nothing to argue. Like, why are we even arguing?
Welcome to the Tip the Skills podcast, where we discuss running and growing your law firm. I'm your host, Maria Monroy, president and co-founder of LawRank. Today, I am joined by Jordan, whose last name I can't pronounce, but you'll hear it in a minute. And we talked about his $27 million verdict, having a growth mindset, childhood. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Jordan, hi.
Hi, Maria.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm super excited. I didn't think we'd get to do this. I don't know why.
And here we are.
Here we are, yeah. All right. So what's your last name?
Strokovsky.
Yeah, no. I'm not even going to attempt that.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, sorry. English is my second language, though, so that's my excuse.
It's fair.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you and what put you on the map.
I'm a Pennsylvania boy. I grew up in central PA. Been a lawyer for about 10 years. I handle catastrophic injury. My office is in Philadelphia. And I guess my last verdict is what put me on the map maybe with certain folks, a medical malpractice verdict in Philadelphia.
What was it?
That was a case where a young man unfortunately lost his leg as a result of medical malpractice by an orthopedic surgeon. And the hospital didn't want to pay anything, really. They threatened to take the case up on appeal. They want us to settle for chump change. Couldn't do that. I tried the case. We got a $26 million verdict.
Jesus.
They enlisted a few law firms to try to overturn the verdict. That didn't work out so well for them. And they ended up not appealing further. And they paid the verdict and interest. Final number, I think about $30.3 million.
Wow, good for you. How did you generate the case?
I got the case the same way I get 99% of all my other cases, just word of mouth from other attorneys. So it was an attorney referral. And it was actually, it's one of the first cases I picked up when I actually started my new law firm, over 5 years ago.
What made you go on your own?
A lot of things. I always wanted to have my own firm. And I started my firm after practicing for almost 5 years. And in my mind in law school, I thought that would be easier than that. I thought I could, start my own shop and handle catastrophic cases year 1 or year 2. So it took a while. Cute. Yeah, it took a while. Like when I started actually practicing, I realized that there's some things I need to learn. But I thought I was learning pretty well. I got some good experiences. And after about 4 years, I felt like I was pretty good at what I was doing. And I know there were a lot of things I didn't get to do yet, but I had the confidence that I could figure it out on my own. And I just wanted the autonomy.
Oh my God, yes.
I wanted to be able to say that I brought this case in. I signed the checks. I did every single part, of this case. Like I did everything. And try the case, it's just me. Like it's all me. It's all on me.
That sounds like your ego talking.
Might be ego a little bit.
Of course,
but it's
ego.
But
not in a bad way.
Yeah.
So I know you don't listen to all my episodes, but I've talked a lot about ego. And I think that ego, I know it gets a really bad rep and it should, but I think if you use it in that way where it like makes you generate and makes you do good, I think the ego is like a really good thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
And maybe
Joe Frieden and I
another
talk about
phrase.
This.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Maybe a phrase. Another word could be maybe confidence.
So let's talk about that a little bit because
Sure.
I did want to come back to that because you said, I had the confidence. I knew I could do this. Where did that confidence come from?
Another great question.
All of my questions are great, Jordan.
Well, the culmination of my entire life, you could say.
Of course.
So, I grew up basically my whole life, people telling me, oh, you'd be a great lawyer. You should be a trial lawyer and things like that. And it was probably because A, I had lawyers in my family, and B, I was really good in school.
Mm-hmm.
But also I was pretty good at speaking, and very few people know this. I actually, I did sports and a lot of extracurriculars, but I also was involved in theater.
Really?
I started.
So was Kurt. Do you know Kurt Zaner?
I know of him. I
Okay.
haven't had the pleasure of meeting him,
So
but
he's one of our clients, and I had him on the podcast, and he talked a lot about how much that has helped him.
even by the time I was like 18, I've done some type of form of public speaking, like
Yeah.
hundreds of times in front of a ton of people.
Mm.
I've already made a fool of myself, on
Yeah.
a number of occasions. So I'm pretty comfortable talking in front of a group of people. Sometimes I'm actually even more comfortable talking to a large group of people than, say, maybe somebody
Something like
one-on-one.
this.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I was like my whole life, I was always told I'd be a great lawyer, but it was because I was good at arguing.
Yeah.
It was almost like not a compliment. It was like my family being like, "Shut up! Like you should be a lawyer."
I was like that as a kid. I was
Okay.
very argumentative.
Yeah.
I'd argue a lot. I'd question my teachers on everything. And now I hate arguing.
Because you have to do it for a living.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, I prefer just not to argue. So I guess my form of arguing is to hopefully develop a case that's so overwhelmingly on my side that there's
Right.
really nothing to argue. Like,
Yeah.
why are we even arguing?
I think it's funny. I wonder if there's because like when I asked you where the confidence came from, it was a trick question. Like I know it comes from childhood. Like it has to. Like you either it's one of two things. You either have like really worked on that component, which is like a growth mindset, or you just have it from childhood. Like it's just the way that you were raised or your experiences or whatever, right? And in the case of a situation like yours where you were good at arguing and now you get here, I feel like at some point, like we outgrow that need to argue. Like for me, I've really been working on for the past few years, like I don't have to like pick every fight. Like it's just like it's not worth my energy. Like just because I'm like good at arguing doesn't mean I need to like argue every time. You know, like it's just not
Exactly.
worth it.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Because it's just, it's can be toxic.
It's
on
so
certain
draining.
occasions. And even for an example for this case, which I don't think I've told anyone, is, a few months before the actual trial, the defense lawyer calls me up and he's essentially saying, hey, try to settle this case. And basically I would need to come down to and accept a horrible number. But then there was a threat that, why do you even want to go to trial? We're just going to appeal the case and we'll do everything we can for your client never to get money, or if he does get paid, it'll be years from now.
Ugh.
Right. Which, was infuriating. It was absolutely infuriating to have somebody, say something like that. Could I have, said something back at him? Could I have screamed at him? Could I have said something offensive? There's a lot I could have said or maybe wanted to say, and I didn't say anything.
But would you have done that 8 years ago?
Probably.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how like that need, like as you gain more confidence kind of goes away? Like it's like, well, actions speak louder than words. Go ahead. Like take me to appeal.
And there
right?
there were a couple occasions like beginning of my career where I'd be dealing with defense attorneys who would never cooperate and not necessarily be genuine in their representations and things like that. And then I'd always get in these email exchanges, you said XYZ and you got to do XYZ. This is wrong. This is horrible. How can you do this? Blah, 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 blah. And I'd spend like hours, sending these emails where in reality, it had no significance on the case. If anything, I was just showing them like, oh, they're getting to me.
Right.
And I'm wasting my time and energy. Where now it's like, okay, you want to talk smack? Then we'll see. I'm just going to work on the case.
Yeah,
I'm not going to let you
speak louder
derail
than
me.
words.
Exactly.
Like for sure. So tell me a little bit. So the case was referred to you, and that's how you generate the majority of your cases. And when was this verdict? Remind me.
This was last May.
And what's happened between now and then in terms of your firm and its growth, and what does the future look like? Because this is like such a material change, right? Because now all of a sudden you have the means to grow, right? And that's like, it's really, really cool.
It is cool. Yeah, so that the verdict, the judgment was paid out last fall. So, right, I had a lot more money.
Did you buy anything cool?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah.
Nothing like a car or a watch or...
I probably got my wife something nice, but...
Oh, that's...
I mean, I got a house, actually. So
okay, that counts.
That counts.
That's cute.
Yeah,
are you kidding me?
It's a pretty cool house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the best.
Yeah. Ever since I kind of have more money now, it's like, okay, the first 5 years, the main aspect of my practice is need to figure out how to be a lawyer and be
Right.
really good at it. And that's something I will always try to figure out and strive for. But now it's like, okay, I want to try to maybe build a business or start thinking a little bit more with a business mindset. And so I've hired 3 employees, and one of which is an attorney. I still, I still wonder if I ever want to be a firm that has, 50 lawyers, or
A
if I just
volume.
want to have a tight knit group of, maybe 5 lawyers and we just handle very few cases. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or so, adding, 2 or 3 additional attorneys to the team.
So how are you generating more cases to sustain this other lawyer and your staff?
It's all basically the same. Yeah, I just rely on other attorneys who trust me,
Yeah.
and they say, "Hey, we got this case. You want to work on it?"
I mean, with that verdict, I'm sure that absolutely has to help. There's no way it doesn't. Now, it's always interesting to me when a trial lawyer says, okay, now I want to start to think about running the business, because I think there are 2 things that are so incredibly hard in and of itself, right? So it's really hard to be a good trial lawyer. I mean, it just is, right? Otherwise, everybody would have verdicts like yours. Um, and I know a lot of people do, but you know what I mean. And then the other component is it's really hard to run a business. Like, it's actually really, really, really hard. And it's not like it stops being hard, right? Like, every time you scale, everything has to change. So I'm always fascinated when a trial lawyer says, okay, I'm going to shift my energy to running a business. So what does that mean to you?
It means a lot of stress. Um,
I feel you. Yeah.
So basically, I'm just trying to concentrate at least sometime, during the week or every day, a little time to try to implement some type of policy or procedure,
Mm-hmm.
and
Where are
hopefully.
you putting those policies or SOPs?
What do you mean by that?
Like, where do you keep them?
Oh, where do we keep them?
Yeah.
Just in a cloud-based
Okay.
system.
I would recommend Trainial or Guru.
Okay.
What about like intake?
Sure. Well, that's the main thing that I'm working on as we speak, actually,
What's
because
your case management software?
currently I'm just using Lead Docket.
Okay. Oh, I love Lead Docket, but that's not a case management software. It's an intake software.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the correction. So I don't really right now. I use Lead Docket and I use Dropbox for Business.
Okay.
For my files.
Okay.
I might look into something like FileVine.
I would definitely recommend getting a case management software. Like, that would be my number one recommendation. It's so funny because typically people get a case management software first, and then they do Lead Docket or something like Lead Docket, which I'm a huge fan of Lead Docket. You should listen to the episode where I interviewed Yanni Smith on intake. It's probably, honestly, the best episode I've ever done.
Right
Like,
on.
hands down.
I'll check it out.
And she talks a lot about Lead Docket and how to utilize Lead Docket properly, because most firms are not like using it correctly. So it's really interesting. Okay. So, and talk to me a little bit about intake. Do you have an intake specialist, or do you?
I do have an intake specialist.
Wow. Okay. So you're doing things a little bit differently than most firms typically do it, but I actually like it, because if you can't get intake down, like, there's a problem. And it's like my biggest annoyance is intake, because so many law firms, so many of our clients drop the ball there, and then it gets imputed to us.
Right. And that's kind of the worry that I have, is just for the first 5 years, it was essentially me
Yeah.
doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
So while I couldn't take on as many intakes, I can guarantee you that I'm going to be calling right away. I'm
Yep.
getting the information I need, and I'm going to be establishing this great rapport with the future client.
Yeah.
And I, knock on wood, I don't think I ever lost a client.
Yeah.
Because I have that personal connection, and I'm
Yeah.
just always, talking with them and things like that. But,
That'll change.
if I have hundreds of cases, it's just not possible to be in touch with every single client to that extent. So I need to have really good policies and procedures and positive employees to
Culture. Yeah.
a great culture to let the clients know that there's always somebody at the office that they can talk to.
So let's say that I see you in 2 years at a conference and you're like, Maria, everything is going amazing. Like everything at my firm, everything that I ever envisioned and more has happened. And like, I'm just so happy. Like, this is a dream. Like, what would have to happen between now and then for you to be that happy?
Well, I'd have some systems in place running like a well-oiled machine where I can take a vacation and not have to really worry about what's going on at the office.
I just did that and it was wonderful.
That sounds wonderful.
Yep.
And my ultimate goal is just keep doing what I'm doing. I care very much about quality over quantity. And so I just want to be known as the guy where if there's a horrible tragedy and you need an advocate who's going to literally put everything on the line and put in that maximum effort and really be willing to go into a courtroom and fight for you or fight for the client.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be that guy. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress, but call me a glutton for punishment. Like that's what I want to do.
What do you like about it?
I like the challenge.
Okay.
And I like the opportunity to talk to people, but it's super important too. Not to sound like high and mighty and things like that, but even that last verdict, that was a perfect example of, is a medical malpractice case. And I take no pleasure in suing doctors and hospitals. I have doctors in my family. My wife is a medical professional. But when people make mistakes, there has to be, or a billion-dollar corporation makes a mistake, and there's a person, who's catastrophically injured as a result of a mistake, they need some sort of resolution. They need some sort of closure.
Of course.
And sadly, not every time. In fact, most of the time, defendants in cases don't really care about doing what's the right thing. If they think that they can outsmart the opponent or they think they can show some gamesmanship and it'll save them some money and help their bottom line, that's what they'll do. So you really do need to have a champion, fighting for the little guy, so to speak. And
that was cheesy.
I want to be that guy. Yeah, it is cheesy. It is cheesy, but it is true.
I mean, I hear this a lot from trial lawyers, right? And I think the ones that do like such a good job, I think they all feel this. Like, I think you have to feel this for it to work, in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong. What do I know?
And I'm not like, I'm in a physical sense, I'm not a fighter, right? But this law thing, this trial thing, like this is where there are bullies around. Like, okay, I can handle bullies.
Were you bullied as a child?
I don't think so, but I was the youngest in my family, so.
Oh, so you got all the bullying within your family.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my daughter's the youngest and the boys totally give her such a hard time. My husband is like very, very, very chill, but like he has like 2 rules. One is you can't open the pool gate and the other is you can't hit her. So they don't hit her, but they really mess with her. And it's like breaks my heart, but it is what it is. I'm like, she had to have some adversity in her life.
Sure.
So that's that. So tell me, who are some trial lawyers that you really look up to?
Well, one is actually my dad. Rest in peace. He passed away.
What did he do?
He was an employment lawyer. Thank you. He was an employment lawyer in central PA.
Very cool. So you grew up around that?
To some degree.
What was that like?
Maybe not what most people would think. My dad was a lawyer. He was my hero. And as an adult, when I started like law school, I did have the opportunity to see him in trial
a couple
amazing. Times, which was cool. But really, he never like put any pressure on me or any of my siblings like to be a lawyer or anything like that. And frankly, I don't think he ever talked about the law.
Really?
When he'd come home.
Did he own his own law firm?
He did.
He did. Okay, cool. And do you do any employment law?
I don't.
Okay. Was it because he did it or it just didn't interest you or?
I just had an interest in doing plaintiff's catastrophic injury.
Okay.
So don't get me wrong. I think employment law is very noble practice area, and definitely people get screwed over
Oh,
in the
for sure.
workplace for sure.
And it can be
And
lucrative.
oh, absolutely. And look, if something happens where there's no longer a need, where folks are no longer getting injured due to
Yeah.
negligence, and I might jump into
I knew
the
you were going to
employment
say that
space.
because I feel like employment is like the new, not the new, but it's like PI firms are starting to also take it on. I wonder if because of that, lemon law is another one that, especially in California, I see a ton now.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And I've been seeing it for a while. I think everybody now is seeing it because we started like a few years ago, we would get calls for lemon law SEO. And it was always out of California, like super random. Okay. So your dad is one of the lawyers you look up to. Who else?
I mean, especially in law school in the first few years practicing, I read a ton of, lawyer books and
Yeah.
law books. So probably read books by, Jerry Spence and things like that. And I guess when I started, like in law school, the people who I looked up to would probably be someone like, Tom Klein or Shannon Spector. They're the biggest firm, in Philadelphia that handle catastrophic injury. And for Tom Klein, at least, actually in law school, I saw him in trial.
Oh, that's really
a few
cool.
times. And that's one thing I did was I always knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer and I wanted to work in Philadelphia. I would find internships with judges that handle those types of cases in the Philadelphia court. And that just gave me the opportunity to just walk around the courthouse and just like peek through the windows of the doors. And if I saw a trial going on, I would just walk in and watch. And so I certainly saw some great lawyers in action. But I also saw some really horrible lawyers, trying cases and not doing a good job. And the very first trial I saw was a medical malpractice case. It was a wrongful death case. And the lead attorney, I think he may have been like a big law attorney who tried cases. He did not look like a trial lawyer.
Do you mean physically or you mean like
or just the way
he carried himself?
Presence, the way he carried himself.
Okay.
Like, for somebody who wanted to try a case of this magnitude, it was just surprising because he wasn't good.
So
frankly.
how do you think a trial lawyer should carry themselves?
You need to convey to the jury what your client has gone through or the pain and suffering. You need to be effective at how you communicate.
So you're just saying he just wasn't good.
Yeah, when you're like, yeah, where does the buck stop? Where's it stop? And you're just like, this guy, it was a type of case. It's the first trial I saw too. And it's a type of case where literally if you do it right, because it's a sad, tragic case, everybody should be crying, frankly. Everybody watching should be close to tearing up and crying. And this guy was just so dry and had zero emotion where you're just like, can he be done already? I want to just step out in the hallway.
Yeah.
It's so annoying.
And if you're bored, the jury's bored, and that's never a good thing, I would imagine.
I would imagine too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm saying I'm not the lawyer.
Sure.
Maybe that's like a thing. I don't know.
Off of what you know about me, what would your advice for me be?
I definitely love what you're doing with intake. I would say make sure that you're using Lead Docket correctly. I would say absolutely get a case management software. I would say really, if you really want to move towards running a business, I would say absolutely really learn from your peers, like join a mastermind, consult with someone. Like, of course, I'm going to plug in Jen Gore because she's one of my best friends, but she coaches law firms and she literally can take a 2-week vacation and not have to worry about her firm. She has an HR department that onboards people. Like, it's like at a whole other level, right? Her intake is on point. Her marketing's on point. And I really think that at some point where you're going to struggle the most, if I had to guess, is delegating. And you're just going to have to get past that. I see it all the time. I've struggled with it. My husband struggled with it. I think any entrepreneur has struggled with that, but really like letting go and trusting your team and saying, what is success? Like explaining to them what success looks like and just letting them do their thing and making sure that, these are the right hires. You're going to have to do some marketing at some point if you don't want to depend on referrals, because you're also depending on the firms to grow at the speed that you want to grow in. And you mentioned something interesting earlier, which was we want to be really selective with the cases that we work with. I disagree with that. I think that if you want to have a law firm with multiple lawyers and you want to generate your own cases, you got to take the low-hanging fruit cases because those will keep the lights on. That's my advice, is like, don't get so caught up on like, I have to believe that the case is worth 100,000 or 500,000 or $1 million. I see this so much, and you end up referring so many cases, and some of those cases would have been worth 6-7 figures. You know, you would have figured it out eventually, like, oh shit, this is actually a better case than I initially thought. I think that being okay with taking some of those, obviously there has to be like policy and clear liability, all that stuff, right? But taking those low-hanging fruit cases, that will literally pay the bills while you get to those bigger cases.
I'm very thankful for the referral attorneys I have right now, but
Yeah.
I want more. And if anybody's watching, if you have any, $100 million cases you need to refer, I can be your guy. But for someone who, I guess, interacts with lawyers as part of your business, any advice you want to give? Because maybe I'm a little too laid back and I kind of just let my work product speak for itself, but maybe I need to be a little bit more
putting yourself
deliberate,
out there.
putting myself out there, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that going to conferences, networking, if you're comfortable with social media, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, and just asking, like Joe Volta. Do you know Joe Volta?
I think I follow him on Instagram.
Exactly. He does a fucking amazing job, and I actually owe him a phone call. But he does an amazing job at putting himself out there, getting cases referred to him. I think that whatever you do has to feel genuine to you. I definitely think that, I know we discussed this earlier, but digital marketing is like right up your alley for a trial lawyer that maybe doesn't want to put himself on a billboard, wants someone that is looking for them. That's like one way to go for sure. Whether you do it with us or someone else, definitely think that that's crucial. What advice would you have for a trial lawyer that is just going off on their own?
As I said at the beginning, that big case or that big verdict, that was one of the first cases that I generated.
That's crazy.
And I was only a lawyer. I was in my 5th year practicing law when I got that case. And if you were to tell me right after I got that case, hey, Jordan, you're going to trial with this case next week, the reality is I wouldn't be ready. I would not be able to go in there and get a $26 million verdict.
Would you have referred it? Would you have referred it out or like brought in like a co-counsel?
If that was the timeline I was working with, yes, because the ultimate goal is, regardless of who's handling it, is what's best for the client. I wish everybody thought that way.
I know, yeah.
But going back to confidence, and what I said at the beginning, I knew there are certain things that I knew, and I was confident that the things that I didn't know or had to get better at, that I would continue to get better at and figure it out.
That's growth mindset.
Right. And so
have you read that book?
No.
So, well, you don't need to, but like I wouldn't read it if I were you, but it's called Mindset, and it's Carol something. And that's what it talks about. So like there are two types of humans really. Ones that have growth mindset and they have that confidence in their ability to learn to do something. And then there are the ones that don't. And once you know this, you will start to see it in your life. You're like, okay, this person just like is never going to get it. And then there are the people that will wake up every day and work towards something. And I think she addresses this, but like this really comes from childhood primarily. Like, were you taught to give up or were you encouraged? Like, one of the things that I tell my kids all the time is like, I'm not impressed by you doing something well that came easy to you. Like, you're not going to get that like, I'm proud of you, good job that you're looking for. You just aren't. Like, I'm very cold about it actually. I'm like, that's great and you're so lucky and that's amazing that the universe gifted you that. But like, show me something that's hard and show me that you can be frustrated by it and show me that through the frustration, like that's how you learn actually. It's like the frustration is actually what makes you learn. It's like necessary. Like it's like proven now. Like you need to be frustrated and then I'll be proud. And for me, like that's what's like really, really important that my kids get, because I don't know how I got a growth mindset. Like I actually have tried to like deconstruct my childhood. And I believe that it came from being an immigrant and not speaking English and like moving here and like the struggle of all of that. Right. So like, can you pinpoint where that came from? I know I'm harping on this a lot, but I just think it's like so crucial.
One aspect could be, this came from my dad actually, is he would always instill in us that whatever you do in life, you should do it for yourself. Like you're not doing it for other
Mm,
people. Um, so I think that's kind of what helped me find my path in law, and that I absolutely fell in love with the type of work I do. And I want to be really good at it because I love it. Like I
mm.
love what I do and I want to be the best at what I do.
And I'm sure theater helped because like you have to like practice and like put yourself out there and maybe feel like you failed and like do it over again.
Sure. And I actually it wasn't theater, but I was in middle school I was in chorus too. I'm an okay
Mm.
singer. And the very first solo I had was in front of a whole middle school,
Oh my
and I
God.
was so nervous. I was so nervous. And like when I came, like it was time to go, like I just froze and I was like, "Ah." And like I didn't know it was all a blur, and like the whole school just laughed at me.
Oh
But it's
no.
okay. I sucked it up. Then the next show in front of all the parents, I did like a low voice and sang. I sang it at least. I did it. And then I got better, right? Like
Yeah.
I had that failure. And that's something too. I think um being okay with failure, not being like you fail, but it's like, okay, well, I can keep doing this. You know,
Yes.
certain life experiences. So me failing, that first solo, did I give up? No, I continued theater and had a ton more solos in middle school. And to me, at least, singing in public is the most nerve-wracking thing. I
All
think
right.
if
Why don't you sing something?
no, no,
Come
that's I
on.
can't. It's too
Let's
nerve-wracking.
do it.
It's too nerve-wracking. It's
You
too
can
critical. I
come
can
up with
talk in front of
a
anybody.
new song for my opening and closing.
I don't know. Maybe if there's karaoke going
Drinks
on.
involved
Yeah,
on
drinks and
after hours.
karaoke. I'll show people something, but just having that type of failure, and even like I played soccer, for instance, and similar to like wanting to be a trial lawyer, big cases, like, hey, I'll take that penalty kick, right, with the game on the line. I'll take it, and I wasn't that good at soccer, so that's kind of what's different between being a trial lawyer. Like, I'm much better being a trial lawyer than I
Thank
was at
God.
soccer, but I would miss.
Don't
You
trade
know,
those.
I'd miss penalty kicks,
Yeah.
and we'd lose the game and things like that. But it's not like I gave up soccer after that. I kept playing, and I thought it gave some good mental toughness.
Absolutely. My middle child plays soccer, and I think sports. I see a correlation with a lot of lawyers. Like they played a sport, and that teaches you to fail and keep going because like you don't have a choice unless you quit, right? Which would not be good. But my middle child plays soccer, and they made it to the finals. It's like the travel team, and there was a roster or something, and I guess it was like a technicality. They could only have like 12 kids and they had 15. So like two of their star players, they didn't let them play.
Mm.
And the game was like horrible because they were depending on these two kids, right? And they lost, and like Luca was crying. And I was like, this is like such a great life example. I was like, sometimes life just throws things at you, and like you're going to feel what you're going to feel, but like you will have next year to start all over again. But like, let this be a lesson that this is like literally life. Like, it's just going to throw a curveball and it maybe doesn't feel fair, but it's just like you don't have a choice but to like feel what you feel. Cause I'm very big on that. Like, I need him to just feel what he feels. But like, you get back up and you play next year. And he was heartbroken because he was the goalie and the third kid was the other goalie. So he had to play the whole time. And it was Miami. It was hot as fuck. Like, it was just like, and he just wasn't mentally prepared for it. So I think those are like great life lessons. I agree.
And I think along those lines, what you're saying is not necessarily the result, but just putting in that maximum effort which this is going to sound really corny.
You are kind of corny. I'm sorry to learn that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I dropped out of college temporarily, and
Why?
couple things. Like, one, I was just kind of going through maybe an anti-authority, like, big time. Like, I thought college was a joke, frankly. I was in liberal arts. I didn't feel like it was challenging. I actually thought it would be harder to fail a class than get an A, and I actually tested that out. I deliberately failed every class for like a year straight. I was basically trying to get kicked out of school, and I actually never got kicked out of school, but I took a break, and just like, maybe it's just I just wasn't ready to be in the professional world. Or, I was told my whole life, I'd be a lawyer. But then when like, well, who am I as a person? Or like, who do I actually want to help? As a kid, maybe like the thought of like, oh, I'm going to be this
Cool
high powered, attorney, or maybe even like big logs. That's what everybody thinks when
Yeah.
they see TV. I make a lot of money, I have these fancy lunches. But then it's like, I don't want to help those guys. Sometimes they can help make the world worse, instead of a better place.
For sure.
And so I was probably dealing with that. And then also I still had, an aspiring actor itch in
Oh,
me.
really?
Yeah, I thought I was pretty good. And
did you move to LA?
I sort of.
What does that mean?
I like kind of moved to LA, but I had no money. And then I got like really overwhelmed, because it's like, what was I doing? Because I remember like reading stories of like,
what year was this?
I was like, it's probably like, I was 20.
So I was in LA like probably a year after you, because my best friend, one of my best friends, wanted to act. So like one day she was like, I'm moving to LA, I'm going to go act. And I was like, I'll go with you. I've always wanted to live in LA. And she's like, shut up. I'm like, I swear to God, I will move with you. She's like, okay. So we moved to LA so that she could act. She's an actress to this day. And I remember it was such a brutal like to this day, like 2 years ago, I was here and I went with her to an audition and I was like, this fucking sucks. You have to just really love acting to put up with that.
And I mean, for me, it was an epic failure. And it was interesting too, because I come from a world or a family where, everybody's a professional. So when you hear like your kid who was once, this great in school and all this stuff, and then he's just like, no, I'm just going to drop out of school and go into acting, which, statistically is not going to end well for you. And so I was like a big talker, right? I was like, I'm going to, I don't need money. I'm just going to go out. I'll make it work. It's what I'm meant to do. And then I got there and I was just kind of like frozen, because I didn't know where to start, what to do.
It's so hard.
Things like that. And so it was a very short stint out there. But
How
it was
long
like,
were you there?
I was only in LA for like 2 weeks. And I was like, I didn't have a plan in place. I just went there like, I'm getting at it. And then I ended up just getting on a Greyhound bus and just cruising up along the West Coast. And I think I went to Canada for a little bit and did some weird Jack Kerouac type on the road type things. But when you tell everybody like, hey, I'm going to, I'm going to go do this big thing.
Yeah.
And then I don't do it. Right. That's humbling. Right. But what made it worse was I didn't even try. Right. That's the worst feeling. Not trying.
But hold on. Did you not try? Because like then it was like kind of like the opposite of school, right? Like you knew school like came easy, whatever. Or that's the sense that I got. Like you weren't challenged enough. But this was like almost like the opposite spectrum. And
Right.
like where you like you didn't try because you were afraid.
I was afraid. I didn't know where to start. And in my mind, it's like, I was a hot shot. So it's like, I don't want to, I don't want to try to get a small role or something like that. Like put me right in the, how do I jumpstart this thing?
Okay. But you see, this was an area of your life where you didn't have a growth mindset.
Right.
Where you were like, this came easy to me, so it should continue to be easy. And that's my fear with one of my kids, that things come so easy for him that he just gets really frustrated. This is like the perfect example when something doesn't come as easy, right? But it's funny because I was always told like you should be a lawyer. Both of my parents went to law school, though neither practice. And my biological father went to law school. He doesn't practice, but I don't really talk to him. But my mom also went to law school and she never practiced. And my whole life, everyone was like, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a lawyer. And I dropped out of college and like worked. And it was like a heartbreak for my family because they were like, you should be in school. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And I was like, yeah, no, it's not for me. Like, I'm not going to do it because like, I just don't want to. And
Good for you.
yeah, that was like a whole thing, but I showed them. So
Right on. But yeah, I mean, when you have like, I'd say a failure like that, where you don't even try, and it's actually what I wrote when I applied to law school, because I had horrible grades and a really good LSAT score. So that's how I was able
what
to
was your
still
LSAT score? Will you tell us?
Sure, it was 170.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Seriously?
Yeah, which is good because my GPA was like
170
a
is
C.
really good.
When I wrote a letter, why you should take me in or why I'm not going to screw up the way I did in college, is I basically wrote in there, I wish I remember the exact quote, but I essentially said, I know firsthand what it's like to fail at something without putting in the effort. And the one thing I can tell you is that will never happen again. Like, I'm going to be a really good lawyer. I'm going to put in maximum effort. And law school worked out. Like, I finished first in my class.
Wow.
And I put in my best effort. And then it's ever since I've been a lawyer, I have always put in my best effort. And so even that verdict that was, that we got the $26 million on, before the jury came out and read the verdict, I was incredibly tired. It was very long months of preparation, grueling, preparing for it. And then also dealing with the death of my dad on top of all that. But before the jury read the verdict, I'm basically saying to myself, like, I have zero regrets. No matter what number they have, I know that I literally did everything that I could do and I laid it all out there. So that's all I could ask for. And fortunately, the number reflected that.
That's amazing. And I love that. I love that I'm a big believer that life is always working for us. Like, I really, truly believe that the universe is like on our side. And I think it would have sucked if you hadn't learned something from that. But I think it all happened for you to come to that realization of like, I didn't even try. Like, I'm never gonna do that again. You know what I mean?
I do.
Like, and I think it helped you get into law school. So like, it's just kind of cool to look back and say, even though maybe you're not proud of that or whatever, it actually kind of worked in your favor. And I'm also I have this weird belief that like you should never regret anything because you were being true to yourself in that moment. And maybe you didn't understand why, because I have to believe that if you really wanted it, like if you really truly wanted it, like you would have figured it out. So I think maybe you didn't want to admit to yourself that you didn't want this thing because it's so sexy and because you told everybody you wanted it. But if I were you, I would just look at it like, well, I was being like, I did what I felt was right in that moment. And I don't think we should ever regret that, because it's so easy to say, as the person we are now, like, I shouldn't have done that. But the reality is, in that moment, you were a different person.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And I feel like I have a very fulfilled life and I love life. And
yeah,
so I agree. Everything that's happened in the past, it's all happened for a reason.
totally. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate it and I've enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
Thank you so much to Jordan for everything he shared with us today. If you found this story valuable, please share it with someone you want to see succeed. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Just a friendly reminder that if you guys can leave a 5-star review, it really does go a long way. I read all of them and I really appreciate them.